Hi everyone, welcome to On the Other Hand. I'm Ariane Zurcher and I am preparing my materials for my fifth sphere. I spent yesterday afternoon mapping out, writing a lot of different things, kind of brainstorming the whole idea. And I had a moment where I remembered that after I hit a wall, when I sort of hit bottom, and realized that my life had to take a radical turn, that things were not going in any way the direction that I had dreamed of, hoped for, that in fact I was completely stalled out and sort of moving in totally the wrong direction. I had this moment. I knew I had to change. So the bottom is my third sphere, what remains. The next sphere that I just finished, the fourth, which is the beginning of after. And that's that moment of realization that it has to change. And so there's hope, but there's also determination and a commitment to oneself, that having spent an enormous amount of time not committing to oneself, this was a big moment. And after that, this fifth sphere, which I'm calling the floor and the skylight. And the reason for that title of the sphere is because I came home after meeting with a group of people who were all struggling with the same things that I was. I'll never forget, I pretended that I was one of the horses, in Central Park, and they have blinders on so that they don't get spooked by people, bicyclists, things coming out of nowhere. And I pretended to have blinders on so that I would focus on getting home without stopping anywhere, without being distracted by anything. I knew I needed to just get home. And I was living in a fourth floor walk-up. And I walked up and I opened the door. And it was called a one-bedroom, although there were no doors. It was really like a studio alcove kind of thing. But I had a skylight in the living room area. And I opened the front door, I shut it, and I lay on the floor. And I looked up at that skylight. And it was exactly at that moment of the time of day when the sun hit the skylight and you could see the rays of the light coming in to my apartment. And I lay directly under those rays. And I had this moment where I felt relief. It was a moment, it was just a short moment, but it was this feeling of just everything being an enormous sense of relief. And then it was gone. It was just a little moment, probably not even a full minute. I felt as though finally, maybe I was on the right path. So this sphere is about those next steps. They weren't magical. They weren't easy. They were hard. And they were born of determination and a commitment to myself. And I think it was the first time I had really committed to myself fully. And that was a turning point. And so that's what this next sphere is about. So I'm preparing the materials for it. I have this vision of grabbing, I think, some of my collages and ripping them in half, or ripping them very obviously down, and then stitching them loosely together so they're not meeting, they're not abutting the edges, but they're apart with thread, with metallic thread. And we'll see if that works. So that's what I'm doing in this video. I'm preparing my materials so that I can get started. So I'll turn you around and we'll get going, and I'll tell some more stories while I'm at it. I just wanted to show the spheres as they are. So there's the first one. There's my second one. There's what remains with this, which I just love, that rusty wire. And then the fourth one. And the idea will be, I just have them here because I haven't figured out where I'm going to hang them, but the idea is that they will hang at different levels from the ceiling in a kind of meandering path. So we'll see how that goes. This next one is going to have some technical difficulties, which I'll explain in a second. I've been mapping out this next one. It's going to have a larger sphere and a smaller sphere, and I'm going to put in lights. The lights on the smaller sphere, I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm thinking these are adhesive, and what I can do is I can put some wire, like fishing wire, clear, and hang and put it in between and then stick these together. And then it would hang, so these would both be on, and it will hang around. I think I'm just going to use rice paper. It'll be small, just big enough to hold this. And that'll be hanging above. And then the larger sphere, I'm going to have fairy lights, but I don't, and I have a couple of different ones, but I don't know which ones I'm going to use, and I'll have to figure that out as I go. So that's the technical stuff. So I'm sort of envisioning a larger sphere with the fairy lights. And then a smaller sphere hanging that will illuminate down into it like that. That's the idea. And I'm going to use metallic threads, silvers and gold. Yeah, that's as far as I've gone with this. We'll see what happens. So I'm just working on this right now and kind of playing around with some of this tissue paper and other materials. So I'm just adding the tissue with matte medium, and the idea is I will be cutting this, or actually ripping it, and then sewing it together. So let's see here. It's kind of wet still. Beautiful thing about tissue is that it really, because it's so transparent, you get this kind of masking effect, which is kind of cool. So if there are areas that are really like too white, I can just go right over them. If I want to darken it, I can come back. This bit is, a pattern from a dress, a sewing pattern. See the dart? That's also great material. It's a bit, the color is not going to be white like the tissue, but it's okay, I'm going to let all of this dry. Just add a little color here.
I'll see you later.
Okay.
Want this door closed?
Yes, please. Okay. So I have bits of green there. I'm just going to pull a little bit over here. Okay. None of this matters because it really, A, I can paint over all of it. B, I can rip it up and use just parts of it. And the more important thing is just to get some colors in here that I like and to go with that. Because I want to do a lot of metallic, I pulled out my metallic threads from Steph Francis. This is a whole line that they have. One is called Sparkle Chainette, and I've got a bunch of those. And then the other is called this one, Multi-Sparkle. I've got a couple of those. So I thought I would just see how this works. So I've got this collage, this sort of thing here. It's not even a collage, it's just paint. I'm going to use an 18 chenille because it's a thicker thread or material. And let's see how this is going to work. So I want it to, well, the first thing I can do is just kind of punch it. I've actually never done this. I've usually just kind of stitched and let the stitches go wherever. So I'm curious to see how this works. These have to be a little farther apart. Okay. So that gives me a little starting point. Now what I could do is I can do 2 like the laces on a shoe, or I kind of like the idea of doing an X, so let's see how that works. I also like the idea of it going larger in some places and tighter in others. I don't want it all uniform, because it's not uniform, this kind of shifting in one's life. It's kind of, Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to go here. Okay, this one. This. I can come in here and color this if I wanted to. I kind of like it the way it is though, so I think I'll leave it. Oops. All right. Well, does it matter that I didn't cross it? I don't know. I think I'll take that out. Okay, so this should have been here. And this is going to go here. And then this. There. There. So it's working. I'm going to keep going. As I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking, what if I tear a section out here? I'll have to tear off this end part. Once I see what's happening. I'm choosing things that are torn, or I'll tear them, frayed, I'll fray them if they're not frayed, because this piece is all about a process, what's still in process, this is that moment of being unsure but diving in anyway. So I'm just going to keep pulling different materials and seeing what transpires. So as I was filming this video yesterday, and I thought I was going to post it yesterday, I got a phone call, and it was from someone saying there was a fraud alert, and gave me his case number and his ID, and and I was so focused and in the zone of working and creating that I was completely caught off guard. I don't usually answer the phone if I don't see caller ID that I recognize. And this turned into a whole thing. It was hours later. I then finally had to go to my bank, realize that I had been scammed, and file a complaint and all the rest of it. So anyway, the point of this is that these scams are getting increasingly sophisticated. And when I asked the bank, what can we do to make sure that, if someone calls and said it's a fraud alert, how do we know it's not the bank? And he said they've become so sophisticated that it's almost impossible to tell, but you immediately say, thank you so much for the information, hang up, and then call the actual number. And he gave me the fraud number to call. What I then went through was a total beat up job. How could I have been so stupid? What was I thinking? I know better than this. This happened to my husband. I was telling him, hang up the phone. This is a fraud. This is a fraud. I knew immediately that it was a fraud. He was getting sucked into the whole thing, and finally he did hang up. But it was like a whole afternoon. We had to, go to the bank and change all the passwords. It was a whole thing, and just hours and hours and hours of time. I can't control the people in this world who are doing horrible things to other people. We're like the apex predator of our own species, and it's kind of terrifying. I can't control any of those people. I can't control what's going on with them. What I can control, barely, on a good day, is what I then do with the information, how I respond, how I behave in the world, how I take these things and learn from them and then use them in my creating. This sphere is all about a different path. The old path was to make a mistake and to beat myself up relentlessly for days, weeks, even years. These old ways are a default. They kick in immediately without any buffer. So today, it's really important for me to go back to radical self-care, to say, learn from this, to say, talk about it. Don't be ashamed. It's the shame. It's that quiet. It's not telling. It's being quiet about it. That feeds that whole cyclical shaming, feeding the shame. I'm not going to feed the shame. What matters now is I continue to keep going with this next sphere. What helped you take that first step towards healing and change? I'd love to know if you feel like sharing in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. It always helps if you hit the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber, and the thumbs up. It helps the algorithm, and I appreciate it. Until next time, let's keep creating.